Hey there folks, welcome to the channel. Thanks for joining us. I'm glad you could make it because today we are going to be making an incredible German sausage known as Bockwurst. I asked every German that I knew, what is the story behind the Bockwurst sausage? And I'm going to tell you exactly as it was told to me. Now let me know in the comment section below whether this story has any merit. In autumn, during the hunting season in Bavaria, a relatively strong dark beer is brewed. It's got a high alcohol content. This beer was called a Bock. Now, you know how Germans are with their sausage and their beer. They needed a sausage to accompany this strong dark beer, and the Bockwurst was born. Now, I'm not sure whether or not this is the true origin story of this sausage. If you know of a different version, leave it in the comment section below. Regardless of what it is, this is an absolutely incredible sausage, and today you're going to see how to make it. Let's get started.
Okay, let's take a look at the meat selection. Now, you can mix and match the proteins. You could use venison if you want. Veal is a popular choice. What I have here is lean beef. Notice it's not very fatty. That's very important. Here in the middle, we have pork shoulder. Now, pork shoulder can be a little fatty. It has a lot of connective tissue. We do have pork back fat that we're also going to be adding inside this recipe. I will remove the skin. And then I've got lean pork. This right here comes from the hind leg of the pig. That's the ham, the backside of the pig. And what's important when making emulsified sausage is that you use good quality cuts. Cuts like these have a much higher protein count of myosin and actin, which is really going to help you out during your protein extraction step. So personally speaking, I like to go with lean beef and lean pork. A nice combination of the two makes for a really exquisite emulsified sausage. And to prepare the meat, all we want to do is cut this up in pieces that are small enough to fit into your grinder. Now, using a grinder is completely optional because you can technically take all this meat and stick it into your food processor, but the grinder will do a lot of the heavy lifting for you, which will put a lot less stress on your food processor. All right, and we'll talk about the food processor more in just a minute. These are the cuts that I'm going to be using. I've just got a little bit of beef. This comes from the bottom round. I've got some pork back fat, and I've got some lean pork that comes from the hind leg of the pig. We're just going to process the meat the same way you would regular sausage. Cut the meat into chunks, small strips, same thing with the fat. And notice that I am going to keep my fat and my lean separate. So all the lean's on the left, the fat is on the right. Let's go stick it in the chiller so that it can get partially frozen. And this is what yours should look like. We're going to grind our lean meat and our fat separately. The reason you want to do this is because fat doesn't carry the same proteins as meat, and it doesn't absorb water. And so during the initial step of the emulsification, which is the protein extraction stage, we don't need to chop up the fat. Only the lean meat. All right, so let's get everything ground up. We're going to do a double grind. Our first grind is on a 10 millimeter plate, and our second grind is on the smallest plate you have. 4.5 millimeter or 3 millimeter grinding plate works fine. Make sure to keep your fat separate, and at all times, make sure that the temperature of your meat is below 34 degrees Fahrenheit. This is what your meat should look like when you're done. Notice we have the meat on one side and the fat on the other side. And if you keep your meat below 34 degrees Fahrenheit the entire time, you should have no problem with the grinding step. So let's go ahead and stick that in the freezer, and let's talk about ice. Now, we're not talking about cold water. We're talking about actual ice here. Notice I've got ice directly from my freezer. You do not want it in that form. You want to try to break it up as much as possible. I'm going to use this meat flattener to, in essence, crush the ice. If you can get your hands on ice flakes or even nugget ice, then you could use those the way they are. But in my case, this is going to be absolutely perfect. When you have crushed ice, it's a lot less taxing on your food processor. It's going to keep your blades nice and sharp, and we're going to put that in the freezer while we look at our casings. Now, for this sausage, we're going to be using a 29-32 millimeter hog casing. Use whatever casing you have on hand. I like this particular size. It will deliver a nice snappy bite, and we got these from the sausage maker. As far as how you prepare the casing, all we did was rinse it, flush it, and put a little baking soda inside that water and let it rest in the refrigerator overnight. That's going to help really tenderize this casing. Are you ready for the spice profile? Let's start with a little salt. We're going to come back with some Instacure #1 for color, for a little flavor, and we are going to add some white pepper. Next up is ginger. We have just a touch of sugar, onion powder, garlic powder, mace, coriander, a little cure accelerator called sodium erythorbate, and then, of course, a binder called potato starch. Notice that I am not combining the binder with the rest of my spices. We do want to keep it separate. So keep your spices in one cup, keep your binder in a separate cup because the binder goes in last, the spices go in first. All right, let's get the food processor. And this is where you got to be careful. For starters, the blades need to be razor sharp. Mine have just been sharpened. Also, the blade placement needs to be relatively close to the bottom. The other thing you need to know about your food processor is that you need to have a strong motor, a commercial grade motor. So most residential units won't work for this because the process of making an emulsified sausage will burn up that motor if it isn't strong enough. And I'm going to actually show you the exact point where your motor will burn up. So we're only adding the meat. The fat is not going to be added yet. And we're not going to freeze the fat. We're just going to put that in the refrigerator. It doesn't need to be frozen. Just cold fat is fine. Temperature is critical during these next few minutes. We want the meat's temperature to be under 34 degrees Fahrenheit. If you don't already have one of these instant read thermometers, check the description box below. They're absolutely brilliant. So let's chop for about 10 to 15 seconds. This is just going to chop the meat up into ultra-fine particles. At this point, we're now going to add our spices. So now notice how everything's nice and chopped up. We're going to add our spices, and the salt specifically is what's going to help extract the protein that's going to turn this into a sticky paste. The proteins that we are extracting is called myosin and actin, and that's what's going to help form that bond that's going to allow the fat, the liquid, and the meat to stick together as one cohesive mass. So now that we have our spices in there, we're going to continue to chop, and what's happening is the meat particle size is getting broken down into smaller and smaller pieces, and that's exactly what we want. The meat is very, very cold. I could just see it right here and tell you. But remember, during this first step of protein extraction, you do not want the temperature of the meat to exceed 38 degrees Fahrenheit. So we're at 28. We've got plenty of room. Let's go ahead and add just a tiny bit of ice. Now, ice is going to keep the meat cold, but at the same time, it's also going to help soften up that batter. So as you introduce liquid, that meat is going to turn into a paste. We've added about a third of our ice, and we're now going to continue to chop for another 15 to 20 seconds. And at this point, your machine isn't really being stressed too much. It's just chopping the meat, chopping the ice, no big deal. But as that meat starts to turn into a paste, it's going to create a lot more resistance against those blades. Now, you do want to go through the process of taking the temperature, making sure you're under 38 Fahrenheit, scraping down the walls of that food processor so that everything gets chopped nice and evenly. And once you do that, you're going to continue to chop, and you'll notice that the meat's going to start to form a bit of a dough ball, much like that right there. See it? This is where your food processor gets stressed out because it's putting a lot of resistance on those blades. It's stressing out the motor. And this is the step I like to call the appliance killer. But you know what? I'm going to keep it real time. And notice that as we continue to chop, watch what's going on with that dough ball. It's starting to loosen up. It's starting to become a little more spread out. And that's exactly what we're looking for. And check it out. Now it's becoming a paste. And this looks perfect. Once again, we're going to do a temperature check. Remember, during the protein extraction stage, under 38 Fahrenheit. Look at that. Absolutely perfect. Let's add another 1/3 of our ice because I do want it to be a little more loose. And we're going to chop for another 15 or 20 seconds. We still have 1/3 of our ice left. We're going to reserve that to the very end. And every time that I'm chopping, it's really for about 10 to 20 seconds. You don't want to chop too long because a lot of heat is generated. So you want to be in a place where you can consistently check the temperature. Let's take a little peek at this final chop. It should be nice and smooth. Absolutely perfect. There we go. This is exactly what yours should look like. It should feel sticky, easily spreadable, and ultra smooth. If your blades on your food processor aren't sharp, you're going to be whipping a lot of air into your meat instead of chopping your meat, and it's going to give you a more pillowy texture. It's now time to add our fat, and when we take the temperature of it, it's probably going to be around 34F, which is ideal. And this next stage is called the emulsification stage. Our temperature ceiling is going to go up. We do not want the temperature to exceed 55 Fahrenheit during the emulsification stage. And this is where we chop up the fat, the protein, and the binder along with the rest of our ice to make it one homogeneous mass. So we've chopped for about 10 or 15 seconds. Check that out. Looks pretty good. Not a big deal. I am going to add the rest of my ice and the binder. Now you could use whatever binder you want, phosphates, non-fat dry milk. I'm using potato starch. And let's go ahead and chop it up. Now remember, our temperature ceiling is 55 degrees Fahrenheit. If you exceed that temperature ceiling, then you run the risk of breaking the emulsion, at which point your sausage will fat out, and there is nothing that you could do to save it. Now, don't think that it's a recipe problem, because it is an absolute technique problem, and all you got to do is keep the temperature below 55 degrees Fahrenheit during this last chopping stage. I am going to scrape down the walls one last time, and you can see that the batter is a little bit thinner. It is certainly a lot more sticky. Let's close that down. Right here, I'm pretty close. Maybe another 5-10 seconds max. You want the meat and fat chopped in such a way where there's no discernible particles of either one. It just should look like one homogeneous mass. Remember, under 55 F, we are at 53, and you know what? I am happy with that. This is what our farce looks like once we are done. It is sticky. There is a little bit of density to it. It is very easily spreadable. Very, very good. This is going to make an absolute perfect emulsified sausage, but we're not done yet, because now we need to get it into its casing. All of the hard work that you've just went through making this beautiful farce can be undone if you're not using a dedicated sausage stuffer. Using a meat grinder or a KitchenAid to stuff your sausage, although not impossible, is incredibly difficult and will ruin most people's sausage. So just letting you know, if you have a dedicated sausage stuffer, there is zero chance you will ruin your sausage at this step. All right, let's load that onto the base and get it stuffed. All right, there it is. Our sausage has been stuffed, and now we just need to make our links. I'm going to go with 5 to 6 inches. The first link we're going to twist 3 times forward. The second will be 3 times towards me. And notice that with my left hand, I'm going to pinch the sausage first. Notice how I'm pinching it? And that's going to help me link it a lot easier. If I go to pinch it and it doesn't have a lot of give, then I won't even try to link it, because it means I stuffed my sausage too tight. So you're going to alternate the 3 times forward and 3 times backwards technique until you're all done. And right here, I'm just poking out a few air pockets. When it comes to emulsified sausages, I don't normally give the overall sausage a poke. I just get rid of any air pockets. We need to cook our sausage. And I'm going to just tell you right now, this is a step where everything can go south once again. You've got to cook it perfectly. If you do not cook your sausage perfectly, you're going to end up with a very rubbery texture instead of a nice tender texture. And so let me show you how we're going to do this. We're going to put this into our Smokin' It smoker. And under normal circumstances, we would let our sausage casing dry before we started cooking. We're not going to do that with this emulsified sausage. Let me show you the cooking schedule. Turning the digital smoker on, and notice we only have one temperature setting, 165 degrees Fahrenheit. We're going to cook and smoke at that temperature until the internal temp of our sausage gets to 130. Now you're thinking that's a little low. Don't worry, I'll explain why in a minute. We also want to increase the amount of humidity inside of our smoker. And so I'm just going to put a pan right in my wood box. This is directly on top of my burners, and we're going to add boiling water. That water is nice and steamy. This is going to dramatically increase the amount of humidity in our smoker, and it should keep our sausage from getting that rubbery texture, which nobody likes. All right, let's go ahead and fire up our cold smoke generator from Smokin' It Smoker. This comes in especially handy because my smoke box currently has a pan of water in it. So add whatever your favorite smoking wood is. Oak, pecan, hickory, apple makes a good smoking wood. Whatever you like, go ahead and fire it up and get these sausages cooking. My guess is this is probably going to take anywhere between, I don't know, maybe an hour and a half to 2.5 hours before we get to our temp, at which point we are going to enter phase 2 of the cooking process. So nice gentle smoke. We've now hit the internal temp of 130 degrees Fahrenheit, and we're going to bring these inside to finish off the cook. This is going to ensure that we've got a beautiful texture, a juicy, juicy sausage. So how are we going to do that? Well, let me show you. We've got a pot of water on the stovetop. It's already at 176 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, all this information can be found in the recipe link in the description box below. We're going to finish our cook in this poaching liquid. I want the final temperature of my sausage to be somewhere around 150 to 155. And honestly, it does not take very long at all. So just keep that water temperature at around 176 F. You don't want to get it too hot. And our sausages are now finished. I'm just going to transfer that into a cold water bath. That's going to cool those sausages down pretty quick. And our Bockwurst is now finished officially. I want you to look at one thing though. Check out our poaching liquid. If you have a lot of rendered oil in your liquid, then something went wrong. It should look exactly like this. Very little to no rendered fat in that water. All right, so let's take a look at our Bockwurst and give it a taste.
All right, guys, it's now time to try our Bockwurst sausage. What do you think about this sausage? Look at that. Absolutely gorgeous looking sausage. Beautiful color on the outside. Nice shade of brown, thanks to the smoke that we've added. But when you look at the center slice, you've got a beautiful pink emulsion. You can actually see it's a little glistening right there in the center thanks to the juices, even though it's cold. So when we heat this up, that's even going to be juicier. Nice springy bounce, which is exactly what we're looking for. You don't want it too dense, and you also don't want it too soft. There's a kind of a fine balance of how you want the texture to be at the end of the day. Smells incredible. Nice and smoky, very fresh. The spices are coming through beautifully. And the reason we're going to eat this little slice cold is because today we're doing a double feature. Directly after this episode is over, I'm going to show you how to take the Bockwurst and turn it into a currywurst, in which case we'll heat it and then we'll eat it hot, and then you'll get to see the process of how to make a currywurst. So after this episode is over, don't go nowhere. We've got a double feature today. I don't want you to miss it. Let's go ahead and give this slice a taste and see how it is. That texture is absolutely spot on. I don't know what I'm trying to show you, whether you can ascertain some sort of amazing texture by my bite mark, but it is exactly the way that it needs to be. It's springy, it's bouncy, it's ultra juicy, it's well bound together, and that's what I'm looking for in a perfect emulsified sausage. I don't care how good the flavor is in the beginning. If the texture is all wrong, then the emulsified sausage is all wrong, and this one has it all. It's got great texture, amazing flavor. That smoke is adding so much flavor to the sausage, and just the underlining notes of the coriander and the mace that's really accenting the pork and the beef. Wow. I hope you guys get a chance to make the Bockwurst. It is absolutely delicious, and although a bit challenging, if you practice at making emulsified sausages, once you get it down, an entire new world of sausages will open up to you. Now, in just a few minutes when this episode is over, we are immediately going to be premiering our currywurst episode, where we take the Bockwurst and elevate it with just one secret ingredient. It is so easy, and I cannot wait to taste it. If you have any questions about this recipe or the process, leave them in the comment section below, and if you like this video, give it a great big thumbs up. If you're new to this channel, click that subscribe button and that notification bell. We've got a lot of new videos for you to enjoy. I don't want you to miss a single one, and I'll see you in actually just a few minutes. Don't go nowhere. We'll be right back.